Here we go.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Well, again, thank you for the invitation to be here with all of you. I really appreciate these international conversations. I think we all have an opportunity to learn so much from one another. So again, just my warmest thanks. I have my contact information on the screen. I'm trying to use a lot of social media so that we can reach many people with these messages. As Bill said, many of us are talking this conversation. How do we get that more broadly to the public and to people in other areas, to policymakers, to governments, et cetera. And so really trying to do that by, as I said, using social media. I want to start by putting us in a little bit of a situation that we can start to think about. So going back to this last 18, 20 months, we've been in these pandemic conditions. Many of our teachers, as I'm sure the same for you in your schools as school leaders, your teachers ended up working online. And so I want to show you two scenarios, teacher A and B, and have us do a little bit of thinking about those. So the first teacher, as both of them were, they were using probably Google Classroom, working remotely. These are teachers of young children trying to work synchronously with their children for at least a part of every day. So lots of times there were parents sitting beside the kids, sometimes there wasn't, but really we took our classrooms into people's kitchens and living rooms and so on. So the first teacher was really excited about what was happening and the opportunity that this situation gave her to have parents engaged with their children's teaching and learning. And these were the kinds of things that she had to say. How exciting it was that parents were able to read stories in their own languages to the children using the platform. So whether they could read English or they read in another language, they still had this opportunity to be engaged in literacy and to be reading, kids learning, listening to story, listening to the rhythm of the language, and so on. She used an example of how parents planned a unit with her. She wanted to have a unit on celebrations, really broadening what that looked like, not just the typical celebrations that our culture might foreground, but all kinds of celebrations. So she said, well, how do I know what to put in it if I don't ask them? What do they celebrate? What's important to them? So again, able to come together virtually to talk about things and to plan a wonderfully co-constructed unit of learning. The other thing that she talked about was how, because of the platform, parents were sharing what they were doing at home. She was, like we just met Janet's cat, she was meeting pets and siblings, and she was seeing things that they were doing at home, the cookies they'd made that morning and so on. So those were the stories she told of parent engagement during the pandemic. So if you just take a minute and think about what were her beliefs and assumptions about parent engagement from these stories, what are a few things that you're hearing there? And maybe if you don't mind jotting a couple of things in chat, and Eliana can read them out for me. Just what's striking you about what she believes or what she assumes about parents and parent engagement? And Eliana, if things are coming into chat, just call them out or read them out as they come.
Sure.
Thank you for your help.
That's called co-planning, parents as collaborators.
Beautiful. Parents as collaborators.
Second language is a value rather than a deficit.
Yeah, strength-based thinking.
She saw them reading the stories in their own language as good engagement.
Wonderful.
Teacher A thinks that parental engagement is about positive parent-child interaction at home. Teacher B thinks parental engagement is about parents helping teachers the school.
Yeah, that's right. What is engagement? Is it engagement with us as educators, or is it engagement with their children and engagement with teaching and learning? So that's a great point. Let's take a minute now and look at that second teacher, teacher B. So this teacher, same context, using the platform, entering kids' home synchronously through virtual means and so on, watching what was happening. She said, you know what, parents just don't have the skills to support their kids. They're either not literate enough, they don't speak the language, they don't know what to do. Those kinds of things were comments that she was making. She said parents just have too many other priorities, right? They have other kids at home, maybe they're working as well, they have a job that they're trying to get done. This isn't important to them. They just have other priorities that trump this support of their child's learning. And then I guess a summative kind of statement she said was, I just can't get them to engage in the schooling. It just isn't happening. So let's do the same thing again, putting in chat your thoughts. What are this individual's beliefs and assumptions about parents or about parent engagement? And we've heard one of them. It's about engagement with me rather than with the child or teaching and learning. What other things are you thinking?
There is one, children spend only 50% of the time in class. Therefore, parents need to be part of the process.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, what I need them to do is the most important thing, right? Yeah.
Another one, very rigid view of what learning is. This teacher needs to think outside the box.
So it's very much about schooling more than learning per se, when we think about learning being home learning and school learning both, right? Mm-hmm.
I don't think I would want to engage with that teacher either. I feel judged.
There you go, bottom line, right? Okay, here's what I want to tell you about teacher A and teacher B. This is a job share situation. So that means these teachers are working with the same children, the same parents in the same context. So the parents that were able to read in their first language for one of the teachers didn't have the skills to help in the mind of the other one, right? So whereas one parent could engage them and they co-planned a unit, the other one said, I can't get them to. So I think what's really significant about this is looking at ourselves, how much we as educators are the very variable that influence parents' engagement. One of the things that I read during COVID, especially early on in COVID, one of the things that was said is that schools that had strong parental engagement enhanced that relationship during COVID. They got even better at it. The schools that didn't have strong parental engagement in the beginning, the gap grew wider and wider. What's the reason for that? The reason is we have to believe in it. We have to know the kind of information that Bill shared with us earlier, why it matters. And then we have to put time and energy into it. We have to really truly examine our own beliefs and assumptions. What do we believe about families? What do we believe about parents and the strengths and the gifts that they can bring to their children's teaching and learning? So one of the things that I've written about in my work before is, as educators, we can take a stance where we look outward. We can say COVID is such a problem. Because of COVID, we don't have parents in our schools. These parents don't care. These parents are too busy, et cetera, et cetera. We can look outward and we can say the problem is the parents, the problem is the community, it's the income, it's the housing, it's the food security, it's the pandemic, it's the lack of technology, it's race, it's culture, it's language. We can look out and say that's where the problem resides. And as soon as we do that, as soon as we say the problem's out there, we have no responsibility anymore and we have no need to change. So like Bill said, if we're going to have a new model of education, that model of education starts with us looking at ourselves and saying, who are we? Not just in relation to children, but who are we in relation to families and communities? What's our work then once we think about who we are? So what we want to do, instead of looking outward and putting blame or shame or judgment or stereotyping, letting our biases be visible, is we look inward. we really examine those judgments and biases and says, what is it that we can do differently in order to have those really important relationships with parents and family members? So the work really resides with ourselves. When people tell me about a helicopter parent, they say, oh, Deb, I know what you believe and I know what you say, but then I've got this helicopter parent. My response is, why is it that the parent needs to hover? So if that parent is hovering, it means they have a need that's not being met. What could you do, or what could you do differently in order to meet that need? So again, instead of labeling, shaming, blaming the parent, how do we begin to look inward and say, this parent has a need that perhaps I can play a role in meeting. How will I change what I do in order to meet that need? So historically, this has been the structure of our schools, and Bill spoke history a little bit earlier, but the structure of our schools has been one in which educators claim that ground called school. We establish the policies, the procedures, the curriculum, the schedule, the expectations, and we inform parents of what those expectations are, right? So that's a teacher B kind of approach. What we do is the most important thing, and we need parents to align with that. I think what we saw in teacher A was something different, and perhaps this begins to help us think of a new model of education. Joseph Schwab was a curriculum theorist. Many of you may be familiar with his work. He passed away just a couple of years ago. But Schwab talked about curriculum as being comprised of 4 common places. That curriculum isn't just that document from our Ministry of Education or our government, but the curriculum is the teacher. We know all curriculum comes through us. We are the vehicle of the curriculum, and so we are a common place. The kids we teach, who they are, their culture, their language, their context, their life experience is a curricular commonplace as well. How I teach in one place may be very different than in another, given who my kids are. Our subject matter is relevant, again, to the land on which we live and the context in which we teach. And finally, and this is the one that I think is really, really important, that often is overlooked, is what Schwab called the milieus. How is curriculum shaped by the parents, the families, their cultures, their communities, their lived experience? And so what I think we could see in teacher A was she was building a curriculum. She was engaging in teaching and learning with children and family members because she understood curriculum in this complex kind of way. So I think what we are doing is moving from a belief in schools as being the place of educators and kids to being the place of educators, kids, and families. That to me is a new model. No longer parents on the outside, but all of us together co-constructing, walking alongside, creating this sense together. So a couple of examples from this past year with COVID and the pandemic. This is one from Australia. I've been doing quite a lot of work in Australia the last few years, and obviously just virtually for 18 or 20 months. This is from Melbourne, a cluster of schools in Melbourne. In Australia, home visiting is not a practice. I don't know if it is in the UK. It definitely is in many places in the US, and it's growing here as well, but not a practice there. Teachers don't go into homes. So what happened with the pandemic and the virtual classrooms is that they were entering each other's spaces. Teachers were for the first time entering homes, and parents were having much more opportunity to enter schools in a much bigger and more sustained kind of way. So what happened with that is parents grew in their knowledge of their child during this time. They grew in seeing how their child interacted with other children, how they responded to the teacher, how they responded to challenges, the kind of thinking, all of those pieces started to become visible to the parents. And parents saw the work of teachers, how complex it is, how multifaceted it is. And so they really gained, I think, in their understanding of what teachers do and the significance of teacher knowledge and teacher expertise. At the same time, teachers gained so much more understanding of parent knowledge. So just as teachers are holders of knowledge of kids, of teaching and learning, so are parents, right? And so what happened is, for the first time, what became visible to teachers is how much knowledge parents held, how much they understood their children, the way their children learned, what they knew, what they were working to overcome, what they were working to learn. And so that sense of mutual respect for what we each know and what we each contribute really became foregrounded. I think the other thing, as we've been talking about, instead of like teacher B thinking, well, the important stuff happens at school, what the Australian teachers were saying is, wow, does a lot of learning happen in our kids' homes? And so again, seeing schooling as just one part of a child's education. So that respect and valuing of home learning was really foregrounded as well. Here in Canada, a similar kind of thing, and I want to focus on learning at home, especially with some of our younger children. So our pre-K, our kindergarten, our early years teachers started to say, you know what we're realizing as kids want to share all these things, as moms and dads are sharing things, is we need to know what learning's happening. And I'm sure in your countries too, there started to be this talk about learning loss and learning gaps. And so we really focused and said, well, let's look at what kids are learning. Is it a loss? Is it a gap? Or is it just that they're learning something different or differently? And so we began to really examine and have teachers say, what are your kids doing when they're not with me, when they're not on Zoom or whatever, looking at the outdoor experiences, the cultural and kind of cooking kids were doing, exploring nature through the different seasons. And when teachers started to really unpack what kids were doing with their families, working on the farm, growing gardens, playing in nature, doing crafts at home, dancing in the living room, all the multiple things they were doing, what the teacher said is learning at home is happening everywhere and all of the time. So this newfound respect for what was unfolding. They could see when they looked at the baking, when they looked at the gardening, etc., that it was happening in all cultural areas. The kinds of experiences that parents were engaging with their kids in could cover math, could cover science, could cover literacy. But what was magic about it was happening in natural and authentic ways, not in teacher constructed, teacher directed, but in those natural ways, the ones filled with love that Bill talked about. We're doing this because we're having fun. Grandma's in the kitchen teaching my daughter how to make sourdough bread, right? It was happening in all domains, which was the other part, not just to focus on the academics, but families were really physically engaged with their children. They were promoting their social and emotional development and well-being, lots of attention to mental health as kids were stressed or lonely or anxious, and the spiritual. And again, depending on our kids, that might be a connection to nature, a connection to the bigger world. Some families were doing meditation, all kinds of things were happening. So we saw all domains at play. And what was beautiful, as a teacher in a classroom, I might have trouble honoring all the children's cultures, languages, identities, but in a home, it's just a natural thing to do. The child's culture, honor, identity, and language was foregrounded. So that sense of self-esteem, of strength, of self-concept was being enhanced. So then we started to say, okay, what can our work be? Let's let go of imposing our school agenda in the home environment. Let's begin asking, as a teacher, what learning's happening in your home? What are you guys doing right now? Let's start doing that. And then let's bring together parent knowledge with teacher knowledge. So parents are doing all these things. And then as the teacher, I can say, hey, do you know what? When your child does the laundry with you and matches up socks, that's one-to-one correspondence. That's a math outcome. You know, when your child sets the table and puts a fork, a plate, a knife, and a spoon, a fork, a plate, a knife, and a spoon, that's patterning. That's important in math. We do that at school too. And so by bringing the teacher knowledge together, the parents felt a greater sense of efficacy that what they were doing was contributing to their children's development. So from there, then, it was a matter of saying, are you going to keep on with this project you have going, or are you going to switch it up and do something different? So together, the teacher and parent could talk about other ways the parent could continue with projects that move those curricular outcomes along. So they could co-establish them. They could talk about ways that might be done. They could talk about the kinds of materials that were in the home and how to use them. And then the teacher, instead of being that front and center person, that teacher B, could say, what do you want me to do to support you as you do this? So that was the point, to use the teacher knowledge alongside the parent knowledge, not to impose the school by setting it in someone's living room or at someone's kitchen table. So one of the things we did here was really work to turn that relationship around, given the context. And it was an amazingly rich learning experience, I think, for our early years teachers. And I think it really built parents' sense of importance of their role and the efficacy they had in promoting learning. So for me then, when we look at all of this, parent engagement then, this is where we're trying to go. As school leaders, this is where we want to lead our staff, our parent communities, to understand that parent engagement is more than an event. Nice to have someone from the library come in and read, but it's more than that. It's more than an activity where I invite you to come to school and do something, make something, construct something with your children. It's more than a practice, checking their homework, talking to them about their social studies report and so on. It's more than a strategy. Let's bring this dad, an Afghan refugee, into our school to talk to us about his experience so that we can be more supportive of him and his family and others like them in our school. All of those have merit, but it's more than that. And so what is it then? What is that piece that's so important? And this is the work that I think any of us in leadership roles can play, is to create this understanding and belief that parent engagement is a philosophy and a pedagogy, right? You'll read literature that says it's a practice. You'll read literature that says it's a strategy. I'm arguing that it's a philosophy and a pedagogy. It's pervasive. It's what we believe about who we are in relation to children, families, communities. It's a belief about what we think our work in the school and in the world is, and then how we live those beliefs in our practice, in our day-to-day work, in every aspect of our work. So Michael Lawson coined the term school-centric thinking. Teacher B was thinking in a school-centric way. It's about me, my agenda, what I need to do or teach. And that's believing then that when we bring those kids in the school, we can do a good job by ourselves. The parents can drop them at the door. We've got this. That's school-centric thinking. And what instead I think we need to do is move to a belief system of family-centric thinking, right? Families. A child doesn't come to school on his or her, their own. They come with their people with them, visible or invisible. They bring their family with them. So what we need to do is create this new model of education in which we believe we're doing it with kids and parents and families and communities. This is not our work, it's shared work. And parents have knowledge to bring, we have knowledge to bring. So then for you as school leaders, what does it mean? My most current research study is one on systematic parent engagement, which was exciting to hear you talking about this evening. It's a systematic approach. It's not about little pieces, it's about everything. Parent engagement has to permeate everything we do. So as school leaders, I'm using this metaphor of a landscape architect. And playing with it. A school is a school landscape, a landscape of people, of events, of things, all in interrelationship, all happening at one time. So the school leader then becomes the landscape architect. And just as when you're designing a landscape, whether it's for a new building, your backyard at home or whatever, the elements when you look at landscape architecture are strong design, resource management, and ecological sensitivities. So for us as leaders then, what's our strong design? How do we begin to plan for our school system, for our school in a way that's systematic, as we talked about earlier, right? So that it's a part of everything we do, not an add-on, not if we get time, it's absolutely integral, right? And how do we link parent engagement to learning? Because we know that's where the impact comes. Parent engagement is important when it's linked to learning. And how do we promote reciprocity in terms of honoring parent knowledge, sharing our knowledge, learning from one another? And I mean, I could talk for days about that. That's just such an exciting piece. Then for us, it becomes, when we're school leaders, it often becomes human resource management. In schools, we have about 85 here. I don't know, maybe it's different for you, but probably about 85% of a school's budget goes to staff, to teaching staff and support staff. And so we're really talking about human resource management. And that comes to the kind of teacher education, leadership education that was referred to earlier. First of all, what do you know? What do you believe as the school leader? Because you set the tone. So what are you doing in terms of your own development as a leader towards a philosophy and pedagogy of parent engagement? Then how are you leading that in terms of teacher development, staff development, and parent development? We see lots of wonderful things in the US with parent universities and parent mentor programs and so on. Here at the U of S, I've developed a number of teacher education courses, extensive professional development, and so on. And then finally, the ecological sensitivities in schools often become human ecological sensitivities. So the pictures you see here, the school in which I've been doing my research has a population of students and families that about 1/3 Indigenous, 1/3 newcomer of various different backgrounds, and 1/3 I would call majority Canadian. And in the entrance of the school one day, there was a grandpa who always walked his little one to school, and a lot of Bangladeshi and Syrian moms. So women wearing hijabs, women speaking different languages, women who see boundaries between men and women in some instances. And Kurt said to me, I want to talk to them, but I don't know what to do. I don't even know how to approach them. And so how do we in our school communities begin to build opportunities for kids and families to know one another in important ways, in meaningful ways, to share their lives, to share their stories, to build bridges? And that's where we can do lots of what I call dwelling in, borrowing from Polanyi's work, really deeply getting to know one another and getting situated in a school. And again, lots of examples that I could share there. So ultimately, where are we ending up? That to be a family-centric school leader, which is what I'm challenging you, encouraging you to do, is to instill within your community, parents, staff, families, teachers, that understanding of parent engagement as a philosophy and pedagogy of walking alongside. We're in this together. We're all in these walls. We're all on this landscape. It isn't home and school. We have to blend those boundaries. So the pre-kindergarten children made a banner for the school that said, all are welcome. And I think they have it right. That's the message that we so strongly need, is that there is place and voice for every single member of our school community. So thank you for the opportunity to share again my information. If you want it, I'm trying to tell you life's work in just a few minutes, and that's always challenging. So thank you, Janet. I appreciate this opportunity. I think you're muted.
Even
Janet.
after a year, you would think, that I would know better, but my students had to tell me how to use PowerPoint this morning, so that kind of sums it up. Thank you, Debbie. That was great and so powerful. And one thing that struck me, and it used chair's privilege here, is teachers gained an appreciation of parent knowledge, and from both sides of the sort of table. I'm sure I'm not the only parent who has sat at parent-teacher evenings going, "Are you talking about my child? Because that doesn't actually sound like my child." And they don't behave the same at school and at home. And it's not about one or the other. It's about working together. And everybody has the same interest, and everybody's interested in doing the best they can for the children that they're working with. We do actually have a point of contact to start with. So I'm going to send you back into your breakout rooms with pretty much the same questions. What have we learned? How can we apply it? And what else do we want to know? But, feel free to work with whatever discussions I'm going to